Will this fly ever go away? Ugh. Welcome back, fiber folk. My name is Trent. I'm the Weft, and welcome to my studio here in the mountains of Western North Carolina. You'll have to excuse me. I'm sharing my studio with some wildlife today. I let the window open to get a little fresh air, and a fly has been buzzing around and driving me crazy. Hopefully you don't hear it on the microphone. I am sorry for the little bit of clickbait on the um, thumbnail, but the truth of the matter is a lot of people disrespect rigid heddle weaving. I was someone who started my weaving journey on a floor loom at Endless Possibilities on Roanoke Island in my early 20s. And I didn't know any other kind of loom existed until probably about 10 years ago when I started to get addicted to YouTube weaving videos and I saw rigid heddle looms. And I think a lot of floor loom weavers and a lot of professional weavers look at rigid heddle looms as beginners looms. And they don't really consider them real looms. And it is true that it's harder to weave production and make money off of rigid heddle loom. But technology like rigid heddles have been around longer than the jack loom, certainly hundreds of years longer than the jack loom. And there are some of the best weavers in the world who weave with just a few sticks on a backstrap. But I have never woven on a rigid heddle loom, and I fully respect it because it's a lot harder to get complex weaves, and some of the things people do on rigid heddle looms are amazing. Really, I come to rigid heddle weaving for one main reason, and that is I want to weave my handspun, and I often don't have enough to allow for the loom waste for a traditional floor loom, just because, hand spinning fibers, especially nice ones, are expensive unless you want to process them yourself. And that's a lot of work. So I wanted to find a loom that I would have minimum amounts of loom waste. And I enjoy weaving plain weave anyway. I think it's beautiful and it shows off those hand spun warps really well. Secondarily, I have extreme back pain. I have arthritis in my back, and I sometimes need to weave in a comfortable position, like in a chair or in my bed. I, in fact, love weaving in my bed, and I'll often weave in my bed on an inkle loom. But there are extreme limitations to the width of the inkle loom and the length of warp, too, which I guess every loom, no matter what, has a limitation on the length of warp. So when things were on sale back in November, I decided I was going to buy a cheap, super cheap rigid heddle loom off of Amazon. The brand, I don't even think I couldn't find it on there anymore, but I think there's one called like Willowdale or something like that. I'll look that up and link it down below. But the one that I bought was for a 12-inch warp and came with 3 reeds or heddles. And it was a very good deal. I think I spent like $109 or something. It was very, very inexpensive. I was a little worried it wasn't going to be the best, but it ended up working out pretty well, honestly, as you'll see in this video. So can a real weaver, and by that I just mean someone who has started and exclusively woven on floor looms, can I enjoy weaving on this rigid heddle loom? And honestly, it surprised me a little bit how much I enjoyed it. So if you want to go through really quick with me the process of what I went through to weave this hand-woven scarf, I will love to show you the finished results at the end. It really is wonderful. All right, this is my Prixie rigid heddle loom that I bought on Amazon, and I'm now going to attach it to the table. The hole right here, and one of these cheap little wooden clamps. At least it does have a texture right there, which will help it hold a lot better, actually. I think that's a pretty cool feature. Now let's clamp our warping peg to my little tripod mounted table. Let's go ahead and close that up a little bit before we get started. All right. We're going to be doing direct warping, which I've never done before. All right, so I'm weaving 3.5 yards. I'm going to measure from my peg to the back beam, and 3.5 yards is 126 inches. I'm going to weave to 123 just to give me a little bit of leeway. All right, let's get started. I have my reed. I'm assuming I need to put this flat part of the reed facing toward the front of the loom. And now let's get started. I think the first thread goes through a slot. Or no. I think the first thread has to tie on, actually. So I'm going to just tie a simple square knot. Now I pull it through. Once again, I am doing this just from memory of watching rigid Heddle videos years ago. And I have very little room in my studio. And now I think I go under, go through the next slot. One thing I'm noticing is the peg that came with this loom is very rough. So on this hand spun yarn, it does not flow very smoothly. So I think if I use this again, I'm definitely going to want to sand it a little bit. I tell you, I should be wearing my Apple Watch. This is a little bit of a workout. I know that there are rigid Heddle weavers on YouTube who specialize in adapted warping for those who have disabilities or mobility issues and they can't walk back and forth. You can also make a traditional warp chain on a warping board or a warping mill, but for speed, I really wanted to try this direct warping method. All right, let's time lapse this. Right, I've come to the end of my warp. I'm going to break it and tie this on. That only took like 10 or 15 minutes. That was very quick. I will say, with a bad back, this table is a little low and the movement, I'm in a little bit of a pain right now, but nothing too serious. So let's see if we can get this wound on without any assistance. So if I remember correctly, in the Ashford video, they do a tie here, and that's it. But because they used someone else to help with the warping process, I think I'm going to make ties throughout the warp. All right, let's cut it off and get warping. All right, I am not used to warping with packing because most of the time I warp with a sectional warp beam. But what I'm going to do is grab all of my yarns, pull them tight. I'll notice this ratchet doesn't really want to loop back very easily, so it's not very stable. I'm going to have to click that back in place. This is just some corrugated that I have. I cut down to 12 inches. It was a little wider. Gonna pull that. Let that wind a little bit. Okay, now I can pull that tight. Ugh. This is kind of a disaster. Maybe this is what I get for buying a cheap rigid Heddle loom. All right, I think we're done. I'm going to engage the pawl. And now it's time to do the next threading. All right, I have never done this before. Let's pray. I'm going to go in through my first slot, grab a thread, or my first hole, I should say. Oh, yeah, I think my regular threading slaying hook is not going to work. They provided one. Let's see if it works. So this is like a more traditional latch hook. That is really hard to get through there. I guess because of the size of the hole on this particular reed, and possibly the size of the yarn. This is the smallest reed, the closest reed that I have, and I'm hoping it works with this yarn. It's hand spun, and I spun it pretty early in my spinning career, so it's not the most even yarn, but I'm hoping this set works out well. I think it will. Goodness gracious, it's impossible to fit this through. Need to find some better device because that's frustrating. All right, so I have solved a few problems. First of all, my back was killing me doing it from the side on the table, and this hook was not working at all. And I figured out the issue is that when the latch hook was closed, it was too wide to go through easily. So I just got a pair of pliers and pulled that latch hook out. And then working kind of off the table in my lap, even though this kind of flops down, it's a lot easier. And now I'm moving actually quite quickly. I lift up one of the two threads, pull it out, move on. Like, this is the fastest threading ever. And that's really fun. I'm pretty fast at threading simple plain weave on the floor loom, but not this fast, because half of the threading is already done for you. If this were a floor loom, you'd be doing twice the amount of threading. And then I check every now and then that things are going well. I do a test, and then I usually get about an inch or a little over, and I pull that really tight, get all my threads going as evenly as I can get, and then tie an overhand knot, and that's what we'll use to tie on later. Let's get a stick shuttle and spread our warp. Do we have a good shed? Nice clean shed. I didn't miss anything. Okay, I'm noticing that because of how this is designed, the Heddle comes below, so I definitely will have to work with this in my lap. It won't work directly on a table, which is fine. That's kind of how I was imagining using it anyway. Let's go ahead and get a stick shuttle. Just got some random yarn on this stick shuttle. I'm going to go into my first shed. Always hard when there's a camera in the way. Then I'm going to turn the camera. Then I'm going to go to my lower shed. Go back in my upper shed. Oh, I never take enough off of my shuttle. All right, so now I'm going to beat to spread my yarns. Let's take a look at that. Looks like my tension is not quite right here. Not quite perfect, so I'm going to fiddle with that a little bit, though I have a feeling the more weaving I do, the better that will get. The slightest amount of draw-in, but that's to be expected on any weaving. Now I have to decide what weft I want to use. I have just the tiniest amount of the actual spun fiber left, and I want to try that first to see because I have a little bit more of this fiber, and I could spin some more to use as weft, but I also have a couple of other options. So let me check that out. All right, here is my sample that I wove. It's always important to weave a sample, but especially when I'm doing a hand spun warp because, it's very different than anything else. And also, this is a brand new to me loom. So what I started with is this fairly bold, dark blue, navy-ish rayon, and it was just overtaking the warp. I couldn't see the warp at all. Just for fun, I wove with the same hand spun that the warp was. So the weft and warp are the same here. And of course, it is a really good hand. It's a really balanced weave. But this would mean spinning a lot more to weave it all. Then I tried a black 5-2 rayon. And I actually don't mind that. I can see the warp stripes, not stripes, but the striations pretty clearly in that. And then here I tried this wool nylon kind of fuzzy yarn that I love. It's very, very fine. I don't know if you noticed, the finer the yarn, the more draw-in I had. So that's just something I'll have to take into account. I started weaving it pretty compact. This is in a hunter green kind of color. And I didn't like how compact that was, so I wove it with a much softer beat here. And then I have this purple rayon, which I started weaving at a pretty loose beat, and then I decided to tighten it up a little bit. This I can still see that marling, but honestly I'm leaning toward this hunter green. I think this would make it a little bit more wearable. This purple is so vibrant, but we won't know anything until we wash it. So I'm going to go wash this and let it dry, and I'll be back. All right, as far as I am concerned, there is a clear winner here. Remember, this was the self yarn, warp and weft the same. This was black rayon. This was purple rayon. The purple rayon lightly beat is a close second, but this hunter green wool is really where it's at. It's so drapey, and I absolutely love the texture it gives. It gives a nice tweedy look, and I can still see my warp. Yeah, that's what I'm going to weave. All right, I've been weaving for a while. I did my wash test. I was using a stick shuttle on my sample, and I hated it. I hate going that slow. And I'd always heard that using a boat shuttle on a rigid Heddle loom is not the most effective. But I decided since this warp was pretty dense and also it's not very long and I'm not really having to throw the shuttle much, that I would give it a go. And I love it so much more. I've also found that when I'm weaving in bed, which is one of the main reasons I got this loom, is I prop it up on 2 pillows in my lap, and it works really, really well. Yeah, I really wanted another loom that I could weave in bed when my back's bothering me. I usually use my ankle loom. Obviously, there are extreme limits on width with a traditional ankle loom, but and there are limits on a rigid Heddle loom, like a really wide one I wouldn't be able to weave in my lap, but this little scarf loom is kind of perfect. I will say that weaving with the rigid Heddle loom, I can lean back a little bit more, which is more comfortable, but I can't really make the kind of fabric that I would want to make. So for this, I'm beading very lightly because I want this to be incredibly drapey. And because both the warp and the weft have a good wool content, when I finish it, they meld together so that the fabric's not too slinky. All right, as you see, I have a weaving companion. I'm near the end. I see my end of my warp coming over, so I am very excited because that means I get to cut it off soon. I think I might have tightened this down a little bit much. I will say some rigid Heddle looms have a separate breast beam and warp beam so that you are not weaving directly off of the rod where the warp is wound. And this one is not. So I was weaving off of this, which was a lot thicker when I started, and onto this, which was a lot thinner when I started. And there has been some tension differences. On a project this size, it's only, a little less than, well, this warp is about 3 yards long. I used about a yard to do my sample. Or forgive me, I used about half a yard to do my sample. So it really wasn't a major issue, but that's something to consider if you're planning on doing a larger project. You may want to get a loom, which would be more expensive, but that has a beam. All right, this is where I'm going to stop weaving. It's time to hemstitch. So I'm going to take my thread and get 1, 2, 3, 4 lengths, and I do a few extra inches just for fun. And then I find my darning needle, which I always lose. This yarn is very fuzzy, so it's hard to thread. Come on. There we go. All right. So if you're ever wondering how many threads to put in each bundle of hem stitching, I have an app for that. It's not an app, actually. It's just on my website, but it's a fringe twist calculator. So for the amount of warp I have, I know that I need to do 30 bundles of 5 each. So wrap around the 5, then come up 2 threads. This is really dark warp. It is kind of hard to see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I pull nice and snug. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, we're all done. It's time to cut off. I'm going to make sure I'm not cutting any of my strings that are important. Nice long fringe so I can twist it. Release this. Perfect. Got a few threads to weave in. I had a broken warp. Well, it was actually a knot in the warp that I wanted to fix, but I think after washing, this is just going to be the perfect length scarf. And I love that it looks kind of like thistle, right? It's got a purple, but then also that dusty green color. So here is my finished scarf. It is really lovely. You can see hopefully how drapey it is. My cat has already covered it in fur, as you see. It's nice and soft. So the warp was originally silk and merino, and the weft is this really fine virgin wool, lamb wool that has a nylon binder. And I absolutely love it. I think it's going to be perfect for winter, and it has this beautiful hazy quality. I call it thistle because it's purple and slightly green, but it has this hazy, fuzzy quality that I really love. I'll show you some close-ups now. Here's a close-up of the beautiful texture of this scarf. You can see the slight hunter green fuzzy threads coming through, but you really see the warp dominance, which is mainly blue, purple, and red, with some white silk mixed in with it. I am so happy with this scarf and happy with the process of rigid heddle weaving. It's definitely something I'm going to do again. I'm going to try to make some adjustments to the loom. It is built cheaply because it was cheap. But for what I'm doing, which is not a lot of rigid heddle weaving, I'll still be mainly weaving on my floor looms. I think it's a really great product. So don't be afraid to try it if the price is right and you can get it on sale, especially. But yeah, if you are a floor loom weaver and have never tried rigid heddle weaving, it is so much fun and so much quicker. I have to show you this. So my original concern was, of course, the loom waste. This is the amount of loom waste that I had for this entire project. This is headers and thrums, and that's it. Pretty amazing. Now, of course, that doesn't count my little sample that I did, but that was, I think, integral to the weaving process, so I don't consider that waste. So happy. I'm happy I bought this loom. I'm happy I used it on this project. I definitely am going to see me doing more weaving on the rigid heddle loom. So if you want to subscribe, I would really appreciate that. Of course, give me likes, thumbs ups, whatever, all that kind of stuff. But more importantly, just join me again. I really enjoy this process. I do all kinds of videos, weaving, machine knitting, spinning, and I will see you next time.